This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, global inequality. When 8 men own the same wealth as half the world, it's a big problem. But will the new US president help bridge that gap between rich and poor? And could we have more power than we think to change things? We often talk about the price of oil here in the Middle East, but how is the gas industry surviving after a massive price collapse? We'll go to the heart of the industry here in Qatar. Plus, clarity on the UK's plans to leave the European Union, or was there? London's bankers are still not convinced. We'll look at what jobs could be in danger. Well, this week, charity Oxfam told us the richest 8 billionaires on Earth control as much wealth as half the global population. Widespread anger over the growing gap between rich and poor led to the rise of populism in the world's largest economy, the United States. US President Donald Trump had promised to restore the American dream for millions of working-class people. Here's Kimberly Halkett.
Springfield, Ohio was once the type of Midwestern town Americans viewed as the place to raise a family. It made headlines in the 80s for epitomizing the so-called American dream. Fewer than 60,000 now live in Springfield. Incomes in recent years have fallen 27% due to a stagnant economy and automation. Job opportunities at the town's main employer, a farm equipment manufacturer, are now few and far between. And along with incomes, hope has plummeted.
All right, let's just layer one more set of harmonies over top of the bridge.
But where others saw despair, Derek Snowden saw opportunity. As a one-time guitarist for big acts, Snowden returned to his hometown to set up a first-class recording studio. But he struggled to invigorate Springfield.
Entrepreneurs who want to raise our financial status up to the next bracket. Well, as soon as you do, taxes hit you so hard that it's pointless.
That's why Snowden and so many in Middle America who put Donald Trump in the White House are expecting him to make good on promises to cut taxes and regulation. After years of watching businesses fail, even Springfield's Democratic mayor hopes a commercial-friendly government will restore the tattered economy.
Trump ran on the basis of dealing with these issues. And therefore, I think he is going to have some significant pressure to produce. And that can't be anything but good.
Most realize the manufacturing jobs of the past may never fully return. That's why residents like Snowden aren't waiting around. In addition to music, he's also a housing developer, creating jobs, but also looking for support he believes until now the government's failed to deliver.
Is Donald Trump going to provide us some sort of Make America Great Again? I know it's a slogan. I think what that means isn't make it what it was, but make it something new that's even better than what we've had in the past.
Never looking back. After decades of watching economic opportunities slip away, Snowden says he's counting on Donald Trump to halt what he says until now has been a slow collapse of America's middle class.
Now, the World Economic Forum's annual summit in Davos, Switzerland, puts inequality high up on its discussion agenda, but some say the event itself is actually part of the problem.
I think it's enormously remote from the people who are suffering from globalization. And I'm not sure many of the people here really want to hear about that very much. And I do get a sense that the word inclusive is a very useful way of just saying, instead of just talking about growth, you talk about inclusive growth. Instead of talking about productivity, you talk about inclusive productivity. So you just talk about all the things you were talking about before, but put the word inclusive in first.
There's a universal, one piece that probably is universal across 28 countries, is the lack of credibility of the CEO as business leader. And I think there's a universal change in the expectation of how businesses and their leadership engage with employees and with their variety of stakeholders.
Well, let's go to London now, where I'm joined by David Buick, a market analyst with Panmure Gordon. Good to speak with you, David. So what's your feeling on the whole Davos gathering. Does it serve a useful purpose for top business people and politicians to get together and discuss the big issues? Or is it just a talking shop where nothing gets done?
Absolute waste of space. You've got 3,000 delegates, been coming here more or less since 1971 when Carl Schwab started it, paying something like an average of $25,000 each for the privilege of being there, to press the flesh, drink a little Dom Perignon, perhaps a little Cristal, rub shoulders, have wonderful photographs taken, make profound statements when nothing ever happens. This year, it might be just a little bit different. And the reason is that President Xi from China has been there and gave a very veiled threat and warning about the problems with trade with the United States as and when Donald Trump becomes the 45th President of the United States. Also, we had a rather vitriolic Wilbur Ross making also equally threatening noises to China as regards the inequalities and the unfair problems that they have over pricing of imports and exports. I think Mr. Wilbur Ross knows this better than anybody else about UK politics. He may well be the Commerce Secretary, but the fact remains is that Donald Trump is likely to get through his $1 trillion infrastructure spending and also the 35% down to 15% cut in corporate tax through Congress. The rest of it is very controversial. And I would suggest that Mr. Trump has probably as many enemies amongst his own party and the Republicans as he has friends, and together with the Democrats, that if any legislation doesn't make sense, he's going to have an awful lot of problem getting it through.
One of the things that's being talked about as well in Davos at the moment is this whole issue of economic inequality throughout the world, the growing gap between rich and poor, something that Donald Trump drew on in his campaign, and yet so many of his cabinet picks are billionaires, and some would say that's the problem right there.
Well, there you are. You've got what you call the populism, who are literally digging their little tootsies in against the likes of Goldman Sachs. And Donald Trump's cabinet is littered with Goldman Sachs people, from the Treasury Secretary elsewhere, and also with people who are very wealthy, and Wilbur Ross in his own case, who's an extremely clever entrepreneur, for which I have nothing but respect for what he's doing. But you alluded to the fact that the rich get richer and the poor gets poorer, and it's been going on now for 20 years. And everybody talks about it, and they all wring their hands and say, oh, isn't this dreadful? What are we going to do about it? And the answer is they do very little. A lot of people don't even have a plan. I mean, the plan really comes from the fact that corporations, the major shareholders, in my humble opinion, are in abrogation of their responsibilities, is that they have the problem or the responsibility of stopping these gargantuan salaries and bonuses. Trust me, I'm a capitalist and I like people to be paid on results. So I don't have a principle with it in principle. What I do have a problem with is when you have the difference between what I call a manager and an entrepreneur. The relationship of pay should be nothing like the same. A manager of a great big corporation is what he is. He's a manager and he gets paid a manager's salary. An entrepreneur who's built up his business from scratch over a period of 20 years, if he wants to have a humpback carrying it all the way to the bank every year, fill your boots, because you have contributed to society. So that's one area. If I felt that shareholders were responsible enough to use their clout, they go to shareholders' meeting, there's maybe an insurance company, a fund manager, a hedge fund, they have 6%, 4% of the business, whatever it is. The fact remains is they should make their presence felt and protest when things are wrong. The idea in very mature economies like the United States of America, or many of them in Europe or the United Kingdom, of doing it through taxation of the individual is wrong, because the one thing you must not do is to kill incentive, and it's very important. But the only way that you're going to close that gap between those that have and those that have not is to reward the workforce below the management. So if the management and all the major shareholders are creaming it off, then the opportunity of people who are, let's put it, blue-collar workers putting their shoulder to the wheel becomes more limited and more limited as time goes by. I believe this is a responsibility not so much for government as for shareholders. And if shareholders abrogate their responsibilities, it's going to make life very difficult.
David Buick, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And the Chinese president made his Davos debut at this year's event. Here's Rob McBride.
This is a symbolic visit. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivering the kind of reassuring message that delegates to Davos had been hoping for, coming at a time of such uncertainty. Yes, globalization had produced inequalities, he said, but he warned against nations resorting to protectionism that would hurt free trade. US President-elect Donald Trump has accused China of unfair trade practices and threatened to impose tariffs on Chinese goods. Xi didn't mention him by name, but it seemed clear who he was referring to, with a warning not to get into a trade war.
China will vigorously foster an external environment of opening up for common development. We will advance the building of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific and negotiations of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership to form a global network of free trade arrangements.
The US is China's biggest trading partner, but the fact is US companies, such as automakers, are increasingly dependent on Chinese consumers. And a trade war would be damaging to both of the world's biggest economies.
China is committed to a fundamental policy of opening up and will pursue a win-win opening out strategy.
This historic visit is being closely followed back in China, but analysts here have warned of the dangers of a head-on collision over trade with the US.
Still to come on Counting the Cost, the countdown to the Chinese New Year and all that rooster merchandise. There's even one that looks like Donald Trump. But first, inside an industry that's been going through a major shake-up, natural gas. It is used for everything from heating to electricity generation. In 2016, prices fell to their lowest in almost 20 years. And much like crude, there's a glut in the market. Now, gas-producing countries like Qatar, Russia, and Iran have laid out what they think is the future of the industry for the next 2 decades. I went to the headquarters of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum here in Qatar. Dr. Hussein Adeli, the organization's Secretary General, spelled out what he thinks is happening. Dr. Hussein Adeli, thanks very much for being with us. I want to ask you, first of all, broadly speaking, how do you see the current state of the gas industry and the prospects going forward? You're releasing this outlook for the gas industry. How does it look for gas right now?
Well, gas industry is a promising one in comparison with the other source of energies. As the demand for gas is going to increase, according to GECF Outlook, which we are launching today, the gas demand would increase by 50% over the next 25 years. And the growth for demand for gas would be 1.6%, which is the highest growth of any source of energy in the next 25 years. So in general, one can say that gas is one of the promising sectors of the future.
And we hear a lot about the oil industry and oil prices and what OPEC has been trying to do with that market. We don't hear that much about the gas industry. To what extent are those two linked at all?
Well, they're very much linked because they are substitute of each other, and the gas price follows the oil price. When the oil price declines, the gas price, with a time lag of a couple of months or 3 months, it follows the oil price. So the gas price for the time being is quite low and is not comparable with what it used to be a few years ago. But the difference between gas and oil is that oil is an international commodity with an international price, a unified one, whereas gas is a regional commodity with regional specifications and regional dynamics and regional prices. So the price from the region of America to the region of Asia differs very much.
But do you expect gas prices to go up, given, as you say, that there is a lot of link between the two prices with the oil? OPEC has made this decision to cut supplies in the hopes that the price of oil will increase. So you expect the same for gas then going forward?
Yes, I expect that as the price of oil recovers, the price of gas would be positively affected and it would go up. But in addition to that, because of the demand for gas in the future would increase, also on the top of that, I guess that in the regions where there is a gas-to-gas competition, the price of gas would increase.
Let's talk a little bit more about regions then. There are new gas fields that are coming online throughout the world, particularly in Australia. That has the advantage in that it is closer to the big markets in Asia. What's that going to mean for the gas industry as a whole, and in particular for the big gas producers like Qatar and Iran and Russia, who may not be as well placed rather geographically?
You know, there are a couple of points here. The first point is that the more we would be able to produce gas and to supply gas, the better for the whole world, because the share of the gas and the penetration of gas would increase. And because gas is the cleanest fossil fuel with high efficiency and with less pollution and less CO2 emission, so this would be very good for the gas exporters as well as for the whole world and from the environmental point of view. On the other hand, many countries and many companies invested on gas when the gas price was high, and now they are bringing their production into the stream, and this means some sort of competition. So the challenge that the exporters of gas, the traditional exporters of gas, like the GCF members, like Qatar, are facing would be more competitive environment in the next few years as the new exporters are coming to the stream.
So what is all of this going to mean then for the average consumer, for our home energy, heating bills, utility bills? I mean, you mentioned there earlier the possibility of prices going up, at least in the short term. Does that mean we're going to get higher utility bills?
Gas is a cheap energy. We call it AAA energy. It's accessible, abundant, and affordable. This, for the average consumer, means a cheap energy, a clean energy, and an accessible energy. So this is why I guess that for the whole world is a kind of a good news that gas would be able to penetrate into the not only homes but also the industries, because actually today the industry is very much dependent on power, and we see that gas is increasingly more used in the power sector, and power sector is going to use something around 40% of the incremental demand of gas. This is why it's good for not only the people and the households, but also for the industry and those who are creating jobs.
As you know, the increased production of shale, particularly in places like the United States, as a rival to crude oil, has had an impact on the oil market. What implications does it have for gas?
As of 2016, U.S. was able to start exporting some LNG cargoes. So this is first limited to U.S. But on the other hand, it's a new exporter which is going to compete with the other traditional exporters. But the amount of export of the United States is not as much as, for example, the amount coming from Australia and Africa. So it is one of the new exporters. It is going to create a more competitive environment, which is good because it is going to make gas penetrate more into the energy sector, and it would increase the share of gas in the global energy mix.
Here in Qatar, one of the biggest gas producers in the world, as we were saying, there are plans to merge the two main gas companies, Qatar Gas and RasGas. What implications, broadly speaking, is this a trend that you see throughout the gas industry? More mergers, more consolidation within the whole sector?
What is happening here in Qatar is the the general trend in the global gas industry to make it more efficient and to become more competitive, because they are going to face a competitive environment in the future, and this is a good move towards that.
Given this need to save on costs and to be more efficient, is there more pressure, you think, to when these contracts are negotiated to lock in lower prices for longer periods?
Well, I guess that the whole situation now is going to be for just next few years, and it is not going to be for the long term. Of course, gas contracts are for the long term, and if they make a contract, they make it for at least 15 years. And yes, if they make contract in the time when the prices is low, then it is in the buyer's interest. But the whole situation is not going to last more than a few years in the next few years.
Dr. Hussein Adeli, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Many people welcomed more clarity on Brexit this week.
We are leaving the European Union, but we are not leaving Europe. And that is why we seek a new and equal partnership between an independent, self-governing global Britain.
But multinational banks based in London now risk losing the right to do business in EU countries. When Theresa May confirmed the UK will be leaving the single market, HSBC confirmed plans to move 1,000 bankers to Paris. I asked Jörg Zeltner, the president of UBS's Wealth Management, another bank affected by Brexit, about plans to move jobs.
For us, it's way too early to now sort of try to conclude or preempt any move. We need to understand first the ruling. We want to understand the relative positioning of the financial market in the UK, and then we're going to reconsider it, and I think we have all options to play.
And finally this week, Chinese New Year is January 28th, and retailers are going all out to lure customers. But young consumers in China are increasingly turning their backs on big brands. Here's Sarah Clark from Hong Kong.
Chinese consumers are one of the most crucial forces of global luxury consumption, and traditionally they spend big during the holiday period. But the tastes of some Chinese consumers are changing, and the younger generation has become increasingly critical of the surge of zodiac-themed designs.
The design by those international fashion houses has the Chinese-style element, only without capturing the essence and spirit of Chinese clothing.
Junko Lam is a fashion designer in Hong Kong. Once employed by Valentino, she now has her own line, which she believes embraces Chinese heritage.
As a designer, we need our identity and our own culture as the starting point. Otherwise, we are simply following the pace of others.
Her opinion is mirrored by the so-called millennial generation in China, who are seeking more authentic and modern representations of Chinese culture.
I think people not really focus on this kind of stuff now, because it's kind of old school.
Chinese New Year doesn't mean that you need to buy some new thing, but you need to enjoy the atmosphere, enjoy what you do with your family instead of what you have wear on your body.
This group in Hong Kong is encouraging consumers to boycott new items and buy second-hand. They've set up their own markets to swap and trade items in the lead-up to Chinese New Year.
There's a fast fashion disaster, I think. So we want to promote second-hand culture. So we want people to come and pick up the stuff first, think about it, and maybe not buy new stuff for Chinese New Year.
It's been a difficult couple of years for the luxury fashion brands, with 21 consecutive months of falling retail sales. Some stores have even been forced to close their doors in China. So all will be hoping for a turnaround in 2017, and Chinese New Year will be the first real test.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports and links and entire episodes for you to catch up on. You can also get in touch with us by tweeting me at Hazem Seeker, and do use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. Countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. That is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.